Welcome, everybody, to this special edition of Facebook Live. We are talking today about the growing threat to women's sports. I'm Jennifer Braceras with Independent Women's Law Center. As many of you know, University of Pennsylvania swimmer Lia Thomas has been making waves both in and out of the pool. The senior recently shattered women's records at the school in the 200-meter and 300-meter freestyle. But Thomas was born male and competed for UPenn's men's team for 3 years before coming out as transgender. At least two of Thomas's teammates have spoken out anonymously, describing their other teammates as, quote, upset and crying at a recent meet. Thomas, of course, is not the only transgender athlete to try to compete recently in women's sports. There have been a host of news stories over the past couple of years about athletes in a variety of sports. There's Laurel Hubbard, who competed in the Summer Olympics in the women's weightlifting category. Cece Tefler was a Division II runner that made news a few years ago. Veronica Ivy, who also goes by the name Rachel McKinnon, has been competing in cycling. And of course, there are a couple of transgender runners a few years back in Connecticut who made news after breaking all sorts of records and winning, I believe, 15 women's titles in that state, in Connecticut. So it's happening more and more recently. And Lia Thomas is really just only the most recent example. Sporting authorities, for the most part, support this, and they say that they're allowing this in the name of inclusion. The National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA, says that it firmly and unequivocally supports transgender participation in women's teams. And just today, the Ivy League released a statement, which we have up on the screen, and I'm just going to read it out loud. The Ivy League is where Lia Thomas competes. UPenn is one of the 8 Ivy League schools. And that league says, over the past several years, Lia and the University of Pennsylvania have worked with the NCAA to follow all of the appropriate protocols in order to comply with the policy on transgender athlete participation and compete on the Penn women's swimming and diving team. The Ivy League has adopted and applied the same NCAA policy. Which, by the way, that policy requires a year of testosterone suppression. The statement goes on to say, the Ivy League reaffirms its unwavering commitment to providing an inclusive environment for all student athletes, while condemning transphobia and discrimination in any form. The league welcomes her participation in the sport of women's swimming and diving and looks forward to celebrating the success of all of our student athletes throughout the season. Here to discuss the Lia Thomas case and this growing trend of transgender participation in female sports are two distinguished female athletes themselves. World champion runner Cynthia Monteleone joins us from Hawaii. Hi, Cynthia.
Aloha.
Aloha. And we are also joined by IWF's own Adriana McLam, who played Division I volleyball at Florida International University.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good, good.
Adriana, I want to start with you as a former college athlete, and really not so long ago, you were a college athlete. Just talk to us a little bit about the Lia Thomas situation and your views on that, and how you would have felt if there had been a male-bodied athlete competing in volleyball in your league when you were in college.
Yeah, I can't imagine how these athletes who are either on Lia Thomas's team competing for the same spot as Lia Thomas, or those competing against her in races, within the Ivy League and even postseason, they must be so defeated. I know I would have been defeated. I'm undersized to begin with in my sport. My position on the male side is actually an average of 6 foot height. I'm 5'3". I would have never been able to compete. In my sport, there's a reason where the net is higher for men's volleyball and the speed of the game is much faster due to the strength of my male counterparts. For unlike or like swimming, like I would not have gotten as far as I am if I had to compete against male body athletes because they're given an unfair advantage given their gender.
And Cynthia, supporters of trans inclusion in women's sports, they usually claim this isn't a big issue, right? That there were these few transgender runners in Connecticut. It's not happening all that often. But your story is pretty remarkable because you and your daughter both had to compete against different male-bodied athletes within, I think, the span of just a year. So it's obviously happening more than I think progressives like to say it's happening. Tell us about your experience and your daughter's experience.
Yeah, sure. I think you make a good point in saying that it's just being basically underreported. And this is what we talked about, what we've been talking about for the past couple of years is that it is happening. And when we try to tell our stories, we're discriminated against and the mainstream news media won't pick it up. They're choosing to report only what they want to. But I think in this case of Lia Thomas, they have no choice but to report because it's affecting so many women, which we said, again, we predicted a couple of years ago, like this is just going to keep happening and it's going to keep taking opportunities and scholarships away. Words cannot describe to you how I felt when I stepped up to the line to race in Malaga, Spain at the World Championships, having sacrificed so many hours away from my family for training. And anyone who works hard toward their goals, whether they're an athlete or they just go to the gym or do a workout, how hard that is. How much physical effort, mental effort, preparation, nutrition, all of it, how much it takes. And so to step up to that line next to a male-bodied athlete who I know, from science and common sense, doesn't have to work as hard as I do or sacrifice as much as I do to run that race, it is mentally challenging. And no wonder those girls were crying because I felt the same way inside. Like, how is this fair? This is outrageous. And not only that, but when my daughter, yes, it was about a year and a half later, my daughter stepped to the line for her very first high school race as a 9th grader. And she had prepared all year, really for years before that, but all year, this individual had just come from the boys volleyball team to the girls volleyball team the season before and was trying out track for 2 weeks, had never run track before, but because they grew up wrestling and, playing volleyball and all that stuff, was a very powerful individual. My daughter then had to step up to the line and have that same feeling. And yes, guess what? The other girls who had to race this individual were also crying. I was coaching. One girl said to me, Coach Cynthia, what's the point? I feel like quitting because I know that I don't have a chance to be an MIL champion now. So this is where we're at. And we've been warning of this. And I really think that this is an important case because what we said is that previously, perhaps mediocre or not very talented male-bodied athletes are entering the female categories. But I think what we're going to be seeing more and more is that male-bodied athletes who are decent or even good are going to take advantage of the scholarships, accolades, rewards that of being in the female category. Whether they, intend to subconsciously or not, I don't know. But I'm just saying that they usually are very proud of themselves for their accomplishments. And I don't, frankly, I don't know how they could be knowing that they've used their male dominance to dominate a female, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I want to talk, there are a couple of things you mentioned raise questions for me. And one is, the whole notion that men are on average bigger, faster, and stronger than women is so obvious to me. It doesn't seem like something we should have to defend or prove. But today, in this day and age, we do have to prove it. And one of the arguments that progressives who are in favor of trans inclusion, one of the arguments that they make is, look, maybe they are bigger, faster, and stronger, but once they start suppressing their testosterone, that will help to level the playing field. In the case of Lia Thomas, you have her advocates saying, well, look at her times. They're not as good as the times that she recorded when she was swimming as a man. And of course, this is true. Suppressing her testosterone will make her a less fast swimmer than she was as Will Thomas. But it still doesn't reduce it to average female levels or even superior female levels. So it doesn't seem to me, Adriana, that suppressing testosterone is an adequate solution. What do you think about that?
So, science tells us that biological males who have already undergone male puberty maintain an unfair athletic advantage over biological females, even after completing the strict testosterone blocking regimen. So, that can't be the solution. There's a recent image that was put out by Daily Mail that shows Lia Thomas actually towering over one of the teammates on the UPenn swimming team. Um, that right there is testosterone and hormone regimens do not change your body structure. So Independent Women's Law Center has compiled all the data into this one place in our competition report. We focused on facts and science to show why this policy is so unfair and how it'll put biological girls and women at such a disadvantage that women's sports will never be the same. Allowing male-bodied athletes to compete with and against females puts women at a significant disadvantage in most sports. And we're seeing it more and more, like real life examples like Lia Thomas, that in these instances, female athletes are being pushed aside.
Yeah, and I want to encourage anybody who's watching to go to IWF.org and take a look at that report, because if this is something that you are confronting or that you find yourself talking about or debating with friends or neighbors, this report really will give you all of the arguments and facts and science and law that you need to back up your point, because people want to say that this is transphobia and that this is, that if you don't want Lia Thomas or these other athletes to be able to compete as women, that you're anti-trans. But the truth is, this isn't about inclusion, because elite sport is by definition not inclusive. That's what people have to realize. Not everybody gets to play Division I volleyball like you did, Adriana. Not everybody gets to compete on a world stage in track and field like you, Cynthia. By definition, it's exclusive. And, if I'm a 22-year-old runner, I don't get to compete in the masters division against people who are older than me, right? Sport is arbitrary and it is exclusive, and elite sport even more so. So nobody's saying Lia Thomas shouldn't live her life, live her best life the way she feels she should. Nobody's saying she should be discriminated against, but not everybody gets to be included on a Division I team. And that's the point that I try to make to people when I'm talking about this. But how do you, Cynthia, tell people when you're confronted with, well, that's just transphobic and that's just exclusive? And what is your response to that?
Well, you almost can't say anything without being labeled transphobic, but in my experience, I like to say that true champions don't place value in the opinions of others. We just stand up for what we believe in. So labels don't bother me one bit, because I know who I am, and I know that the person and the integrity I have is valid and true. So one thing that I would encourage others is to just dispel the labels, because they're not accurate. Transphobic, again, is one of those words that has no value, because we're talking about science here. We're talking about fairness for girls. Again, like you said, we're not talking about living your life and being your best person. That's not what we're talking about. I actually have a transgender friend who's male to female transgender, or they don't even like that label. Frankly, they don't even like that word. They are just male-bodied, expressing as a female, and said they would never, ever enter a women's category in athletics. And this person is very athletic. So they recognize that this is not the way to express themselves as feminine or to honor other females, is what this person says.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the female swimmers in the Ivy League are not too happy about this. Although at the same time, the ones who swim with her, many of them like her, they're friends with her, they're compassionate towards her. So they're conflicted, right? They're conflicted. They they want to be tolerant as people, but they also want to have a level playing field when they compete. And so they've been afraid to speak out. And the NCAA has come out strongly against them. The Ivy League has come out strongly against their position. Um, there are rumors that they've been told by the administration and by the coach at Penn to just keep their mouths shut and not say anything. I want to ask each of you, starting with Cynthia, what advice you would give these young women who are upset about Lia Thomas participating in these competitive tournaments and meets, but are being pressured from all sides to stay quiet.
There we go. Yes, it's really tough because, like you said, it is exclusive, even to earn a college scholarship, especially for an Ivy League team. So they're put in this position where they don't want to lose what they've earned. And that it goes with a lot of professional female athletes as well. So it's really discriminatory and wrong that the NCAA and the school and the coaches are placing these poor girls who are already mentally distraught and traumatized in this position, because I can tell you from firsthand experience, I know what that mental anguish feels like. And someone needs to be doing a study on the mental health issues this is causing our biological women. So the bottom line is that we need separate categories in order to keep Title IX in place and keep giving accolades and award opportunities to our biological female athletes, our female bodied athletes. So I would tell these girls, you know what, you do have a lot to lose, but if you have an inkling of what this means for future generations and you would like to speak up, to just think about the word brave and go back to that word when you're feeling challenged and think about what it means for future generations. And again, I sympathize that you're in a hard position and that you might lose something, but to me, I won't step on a track with a biological male ever again. I will step up to that starting line and I'll walk off the track, because if we don't have the integrity of female sports, we don't have sports. So I would say, think about that word brave, think about female leaders in history and how they had to be brave as well. So I'm going to actually encourage those girls to speak up and speak out and stand strong, because we need leaders. We need leaders in every area. And we need all of us to come together and speak up and speak out.
That's very well said, Cynthia. What would you say, Adriana, as somebody who not so long ago was a college student and competing in Division I athletics?
Yeah, I would like to echo every single one of Cynthia's sentiments. She's exactly correct. There's female athletes, their stories and voices, and those who are even surrounded by female athletes, so parents, friends, their voices are important, and these stories make people realize what's at stake for women athletes and makes it real and puts a human face on it. And even prior to working at IWF, I shared my voice through IWF, through the link that's in the comments. And you can share yours today too, because we need more and more stories and more voices, because that helps protect women's sports and helps us fight to protect female athletes.
And I have a question. I sort of hate to put you on the spot live, but I'm going to. Yeah. If any of these young women who are swimming in the Ivy League want to reach out to either of you, Cynthia or Adriana, is that something that you would welcome, or are you able to talk to them confidentially and kind of advise them? Because if so, they could reach out to our team and we could pass that information along to you.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love it. I'm welcoming that. I love to give advice for strength in every area. That's why I'm a metabolic practitioner. I work with Olympians and professional athletes. So I'm very familiar with the position they're in, what they have to lose, and how they could navigate to stand strong with the least compromising, we'll just say.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend. As our digital marketing director, if you want to reach out to us via Facebook message, Instagram, or even our info@iwf.org, your story, if you choose, can also remain anonymous. We are here to elevate your voice, and sometimes if you don't feel comfortable, especially these Ivy League athletes that are competing now, we're here to be your voice, and it doesn't have to have your name associated, but we want to be here to elevate that. And I will say, as Cynthia's mentioned, she's a coach. I'm a coach as well. We're also here to advise and always be there for athletes across the board. So we're here.
Thank you guys so much. That is so great to hear. And thank you for joining me today to talk about this growing threat to women's sports.
I have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
One thing, there's a women's working policy group coming out right now, and they're unfortunately pushing that it's only through puberty that these advantages are gained. And yes, absolutely, puberty does enhance the advantages of the biological male structure and muscle mass and heart. However, I would like to differentiate that these changes happen in the womb. This is genetic. This is happening with the myonuclei, which are the satellite cells that build muscle fibers. They are more prevalent already in the womb. So I would like to just point out that pushing puberty blockers at an early age is not the answer to this question.
That is a whole nother can of worms that we could probably discuss for another half an hour. But I will also add that in our competition report, we discussed some of the science on prepubescent male athletic advantage. And it does seem that there is an advantage even before puberty, although of course puberty accelerates that, by thousands of times. But, and the policy considerations, I have to say, are different at younger ages, right? I mean, the more elite the sport is, the more it's not a place where we're necessarily trying to be inclusive, as I said before, right? Kindergarten soccer, does it matter if the boys and girls play on the same team or against each other? Not really, right? So that's why I look really hard at some of these state bills that come up and look to see what they're trying to prohibit, what they're trying to allow, and whether they're allowing local communities to kind of accommodate particular situations without having a bright line rule. So for me personally, I think it's an easy question when you're talking about the Olympics or college level sports, even varsity sports. Lower than that, I think it gets complicated, but all of these things are things we need to be able to talk about, and we need to be able to talk about it in terms of the science and the facts and the law, and not call each other names because people might have concerns or feelings about it that are different than our own. So it's so great to have the conversation with both of you. I know that this weekend, Lia Thomas is competing in Philadelphia against swimmers from Dartmouth and Yale. And we will certainly be keeping an eye on that competition and on the reaction in the swimming world and across the world of college sports. So stay tuned. This is a story that's not going away. From all of us at Independent Women's Forum and Independent Women's Law Center, thank you for joining us and for tuning in to this very special Facebook Live event.
Aloha.